Welcome to Summer in the Psalms. Have you ever seen that commercial, or remember just several years ago, Southwest Airlines did a whole series of commercials with the question, do you want to get away? And so there would be somebody, and they were typically funny, have something happen, maybe spilled something or broke something, and they're like, uh-oh, and then say, do you want to get away? So obviously, how you would get away is you get on Southwest Airlines flight and you go somewhere as a refuge. And today, our psalm is sort of like that in the beginning. We're going to take a look at Psalm 16, verses 1 and 2, where David is writing, and David would find himself in some really difficult, harsh, hard situations, and maybe you find yourself in one of those situations today. So what do you do when things are hard, when things are difficult? And so we can learn from David on what he did, and so we'll take a look at this song that he wrote to help us in our journey as well. So David writes, it says a psalm of David, or Miktam of David, and it says, "Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. I say to the Lord, you are my Lord, and I have no good apart from you." So at the very beginning, we see that David is obviously in some situation where he's asking for God to preserve his life, to protect his life. He's needing some safety and security, but also he says, in you I take refuge. And so when David says, if you say, where do you want to get away? Southwest Airlines is asking the question, where do you want to go? David is saying it's not really where you go, it's who you go to that matters. And he says for him, he finds his refuge in God. And so God is an ever-present refuge in our life, and he's a safe place for us to be. He's a safe person for us to be with. And so David says, that's where I find myself going. And David, you think about David's life real quickly. When he was a shepherd, he faced a bear. When he was a shepherd, he faced a lion. And then eventually, he even faced Goliath. And so in those situations, his refuge was not the place that he was at, but it was the person who was with him. And the person that he would go to was God. Also, we see in David's life when he was being persecuted by King Saul, who became jealous of him, threw spears at him, had his army looking for him in the wilderness. What we discover is David always turned to the Lord. And so that's what we should do too. One of the interesting things about this text is David turns to the Lord in prayer, and 3 times in these 2 verses he refers to God, and he talked about God as being with the name God, which is his name Elohim, which is the name we find in Genesis 1, and then also, and you could circle these in your scripture, Lord, capital L-O-R-D, which is his name, covenant name, which is Yahweh, and then he uses you are my Lord, meaning Adonai. And so there's really 3 different ways that David is referring to God here as the powerful creator, God, as the covenant loving God with Israel, as Yahweh, that's God's personal name. And then he's referring to him as Adonai, which would be master. And so God is all of this to him. And so he's powerful, he's personal, and also he's a protector and master of his life. And so what David did is what we should do. He prayed to God based on who God is for his life. And so when we do pray and go to God, we come to him and we find him being our refuge. So you're getting away to God is one of the ways you do that is through prayer. And so when you pray, how do you pray? How do you get away? One of the things that I find to be true in my life and people who have been in church is they tend to pray like other people pray. And I want to encourage you not to pray like other people around you are necessarily praying, but I want you to use the text of Scripture to learn how to talk to God. What David did is he talked to God based on the text of Scripture. And if you really want to learn how to pray, the best way to learn how to pray is to take text and learn how to talk to God. And so like maybe if you have your cell phone, it's we say things in this talk and it gets transformed to text. This is more of taking the text and transforming your talk so that you talk to God in a way that honors him, that God hears your prayers. It's not about being verbatim, but it's thinking through about how you pray. For example, the greatest prayer of all time is the Lord's Prayer. And so Jesus is teaching his disciples how to pray. And so you would take that text and you would look at the themes or the way that Jesus taught how to pray, and you would pray. And that's how you would get away to God. And so you would pray in order to get away to God. And he says at the end of the verse 2, he says, you are my Lord, you are my Adonai, you are my master, and I have no good apart from you. And so what is your good in life? In other words, what is the source of the goodness of your life? For David, the source of his goodness was not his circumstances per se, was not being king, it was not being shepherd, but his good was God who was at work in his life, being one who preserves his life, one he takes refuge in, being his safety and security. And so what is the source of your goodness? For David, his source of goodness was God. That's why he went to pray to God. So when he wanted to get away, he went to prayer. In other words, he went to have a conversation with God. So he would speak to God and he would listen to God. So whatever you're going through today, the source of what you're trusting in, or let's say this, the source of who you trust in is important. And so everything that you have around you really is a resource, but God is the source because God is the one who supplies what you need. And so when David says, God is my source, is because God is his supply. He's a supplier of his safety. He's a supplier of his goodness. Everything that David needed in life, he got from God. And so that's a good thing for us to remember, is everything we need, we get from Jesus. So, when Jesus fed the 5,000, he fed the 4,000 in the Gospels, what we discover is Jesus was teaching the disciples two things. Everything that they need, they get from him. And he was also teaching them at the same time, everything that they need for other people, they get from him. And so God is always a source. That's why when we get away, we're not getting away necessarily to a place, but we're actually getting away to a person. So today, in your difficulty, in your hardship, in your pain, in your loneliness, do you need to get away? Get away to Jesus. Spend time with him in prayer. Spend time in the Word so that you know how to pray to him, how to talk to God. And I promise you, it may not seem like he's listening, but he's always there, and he's always preserving your life, and he's always a refuge for you. So today, get away to God. Thank you for joining us with Summer in the Psalms. Hope you find encouragement from this. If you would take time to share this with a friend that might be encouraging to them, I would appreciate it. And may God be with you, and may he be an ever-present refuge in your life.